Harry leaves the High Court after 8 hours on the stand. Under intense questioning, the Duke listed Mirror articles that would have been impossible, he alleged, without illegal information gathering. He said it would be an injustice if his claims were not upheld. The Prince stayed in court and watched intently as a former Mirror royal editor also faced questions. There's still 2 weeks of evidence to come, and the judge's decision is due in late summer, also tonight. The desperate humanitarian and ecological crisis engulfing Kherson as thousands of homes are consumed by the rising floodwaters. Holiday hell at Britain's biggest airport, with strikes threatened almost every weekend this summer.
Rover's return, Coronation Street.
Corrie legend Julie Goodyear is diagnosed with dementia and this year's first extreme heat warning as Britain braces for a scorching weekend. By Mirror Group journalists were not believed. The Duke of Sussex, who is suing the newspaper publisher over allegations of unlawful information gathering, finally left the witness box after giving 8 hours of evidence. During today's exchanges, he described how he'd been embarrassed by stories about his love life. He said the press had misled him and covered up its own wrongdoing his entire life. Mirror Group Newspapers is contesting his claims. From the High Court, Rebecca Barry reports.
A royal at the Royal Courts of Justice so rare, Prince Harry wants to make this count. 8 hours in the witness box to convey 15 years' worth of alleged frenzied and criminal activity by Mirror Group newspapers. If the court were to find that you were never hacked by any MGN journalists, the defence barrister asked him, would this be a relief or a disappointment? The Duke of Sussex replied, I believe that phone hacking was on an industrial scale across at least 3 of the papers at the time. That is beyond any doubt. I would feel some injustice if that wasn't accepted. Mr. Green then asked, so you want to have been phone hacked? Prince Harry replied, no one wants to have been phone hacked. He accuses the publisher of the Daily Mirror, the Sunday Mirror and the Sunday People of phone hacking, getting information by deception and using private investigators for unlawful activities. He said this article about his split from Chelsea Davy was hurtful, describing an invoice for a private investigator titled Project Harry as incredibly disturbing. And when discussing this article about him going to a lap dancing club and Chelsea Davy reportedly screaming at him for half an hour on the phone, he told the court it was bizarre and suspicious that Mirror Group journalists had his girlfriend's phone number, alleging they accessed her phone bills.
Have you got anything to say?
Former editor of the Daily Mirror, Piers Morgan, is not giving evidence in this trial. Here's what he told ITV News today after Prince Harry accused him of listening to Princess Diana's private messages.
He's perfectly entitled to his opinions, and I will be perfectly entitled to have mine.
Prince Harry seemed more confident in the witness box today, but after more than a day and a half of questions, his barrister asked him what it had been like going through all this with the world's media watching. After a very long pause, looking and sounding emotional, he simply replied, "It's a lot."
The defence say he's in the land of total speculation, pointing to a lack of evidence. Prince Harry insists journalists would have gone to extreme lengths to cover their tracks. He's now done all he can to try and prove that.
Well, Rebecca's outside the court now. Rebecca, you've been watching Prince Harry in court for the past 2 days. How did he seem when it all finished?
Well, he was clearly very relieved when he left that witness box. He went to sit next to his lawyer. He leaned back, puffed out his cheeks and rubbed his eyes and face. Interestingly, he didn't leave the courtroom then, as most witnesses do. He chose to stay and watch as one of the journalists he accuses took to the stand to be cross-examined. Former royal correspondent at the Daily Mirror, Jane Kerr, is bylined in a number of articles involved in this trial. She insists that she never hacked phones and she never told anyone to do anything unlawful. She said it was extremely upsetting to be accused of such a thing. Now, this trial isn't over. There's still a few weeks left. Prince Harry is just one of 4 representative claimants involved in this trial, including Coronation Street actors Michael Turner and Nicky Sanderson. And tomorrow we expect to start hearing details about her individual claim.
Rebecca Barry outside the High Court. Thank you. And to see all the articles Prince Harry has complained about at the High Court and for continuing coverage, head to our website, itv.com/news. Moving on now, and a massive effort is underway in southern Ukraine tonight to avert a humanitarian and ecological disaster after yesterday's destruction of a huge dam. Large areas are underwater, with thousands of people evacuated from their homes in both Ukrainian and Russian-controlled areas. It's still not clear what caused the explosion on the Dnieper River, with both sides blaming each other. Our Europe editor James Mates has the latest.
Already the only things moving in this part of the city of Kherson are boats. And still the waters rise. Another metre expected in the next 24 hours, by which time many of these roofs will be underwater. So there is an urgency to the evacuations if what is already a disaster is not to turn to widespread tragedy. This truck and its passengers, who thought they were being carried to safety, had to be rescued itself. Refugees fleeing for their lives with the things most important to them from an entirely man-made catastrophe. I was sitting tight, hoping I could stay, she said, but the water began to run so fast that my son got a boat from a neighbour and got me out. 29 towns, villages and settlements inundated so far, thousands displaced. International humanitarian aid that would normally be available after such a disaster getting nowhere near what are still front lines in the war. The Ukrainian military, who for months have been dropping bombs on Russians from small drones, now adapting their technology to drop water to the stranded. As to who or what caused this disaster, Russian forces were and are in complete control of this dam, and the Ukrainians have absolutely no doubt as to what happened.
Around 3 o'clock in the morning, Russian forces detonated the dam and machinery hall of the Kakhovka hydroelectric power station. This act of terror resulted in a breach of the Kakhovka reservoir, unleashing a torrent of water down the Dnieper River.
In contrast, Vladimir Putin pointed the finger at Ukraine, calling it a barbaric attack. But Russian denials have, to say the least, lost some of their impact after they've repeatedly been shown to have lied. There is a consensus among experts that this sort of damage could not be inflicted by missiles. It would have to have been blown from the inside. And the impact on Ukraine's planned counter-offensive on this part of the front may be significant. These waters will recede in time, but the prospect of sending men and armour across the Dnieper River, challenging at the best of times, right now looks insuperable. Not that the shelling has stopped, even as Ukrainian civilians fled. They were ducking Russian bombardment. This is a cruel, cruel war. James Mates, ITV News.
Well, the collapse of the Kakhovka Dam is likely to have far-reaching and long-lasting effects on the southern region of Ukraine and indeed beyond. So what might the consequences be, and what could this tell us about who or what lies behind the blast? Well, Garrett Vincent is here, and it's a shocking story, Garrett, isn't it?
Yeah, Mary, let's start with a look at the map where, until yesterday morning, the Kakhovka Dam stretched across the mighty Dnieper River, around 25 miles east of the city of Kherson in Russian-controlled southern Ukraine. It was built in the 1950s and held back an enormous reservoir of water, and it formed part of a hydroelectric power plant. Water from the reservoir supplies the Crimean Peninsula, which was annexed by Russia in 2014, and further upstream, the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power station, the largest in Europe. Now, we've already seen some of the catastrophic effects of the destruction of the dam. Have a look at these before and after satellite images. But Ukrainian officials say that as many as 80 towns and villages across an area of nearly 1,000 square miles between the dam and the Black Sea coast are still at risk of flooding, and hundreds of thousands of people face losing their normal access to drinking water. Now, Ukraine is usually a globally significant producer and exporter of grain, but its agriculture ministry warns that the loss of the dam will leave 500,000 hectares of land, that's an area about the size of Devon, without irrigation, turning fields into deserts by this time next year. The price of wheat has already jumped, and there are also worries about the cooling mechanism at that nuclear plant, which also relies on water from the reservoir. So, who did it? Well, the British and American governments both say it's too soon to say for sure, but Ukraine and Russia are blaming each other, as James was saying. The Kremlin says it was the result of Ukrainian shelling, an act of sabotage to deprive the Crimea, which is the jewel in the crown of Russia's conquest in Ukraine, of water. Ukraine's president says that's nonsense and impossible. The only way to blow up the dam, he says, would be to use mines, and that's what the Russian occupiers did. But there's no doubt that the dam's destruction and the flooding has made it much more difficult for Ukraine's counter-attacking army to get into this part of the country to take on Russia's forces. The battlefield, Mary, has changed.
Geraint, thank you. Well, our correspondent Emma Murphy is in the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv, tonight. Emma, the destruction of this dam is already clearly having a big impact on the ground. Is it likely to change Ukrainian tactics in this war?
Well, it's certainly going to be something they're going to have to look at incredibly carefully. What we would have expected to see in this much discussed counter-offensive that's expected in the coming days and weeks would be for Ukrainian forces to try and push across the Dnipro, to try and get to that left bank, which is still occupied by Russian forces. Now, the dam could have been a really useful route to get them across, a piece of solid standing that they could have really tried to make use of. Of course, that has now gone. And of course, the Dnipro, which was always a challenging river, is so much bigger now. It basically means that they've lost that point of attack, and it means that the Russians can kind of sit a little bit more calmly on that left bank because they know that the Ukrainians are not going to be able to get across to them. That therefore means that the Russians can start to really work on other places along this 600-mile front line. And so I think the feeling in Kyiv tonight is that this may slow down that counterattack. It may also make it more complicated, but that counterattack will still come. It's just possibly less clear exactly when.
Emma Murphy in Kyiv, thank you. Pope Francis has undergone a 3-hour operation on his abdomen today. The Vatican said the Pope had been experiencing pain in his intestine. Before leaving for surgery today, the 86-year-old attended his weekly general audience. The Vatican said the operation had been a success. Now, the holiday plans of millions of us are under threat tonight after Heathrow's security guards announced a series of strikes across the summer. Nearly every weekend between now and the end of August will be affected, and Sejal Karia is at Heathrow for us. This is a grim prospect, isn't it, Sejal?
Yes, Mary. Delays, disruption and chaos is what's being predicted right in the middle of peak holiday season. 2,000 members of the union Unite will walk out in what is being described as a major escalation in this pay dispute. It all begins on the 24th of June and goes on until the 27th of August. Now, these dates coincide with some of the busiest times for travel, including the festival of Eid at the end of June. And then the beginning, of course, of the school holidays at the end of July, and then culminating in the August bank holiday. Now, the strikes are predicted to affect Terminal 5, and for the first time in this long-running pay dispute, also Terminal 3. And, of course, Heathrow is the UK's busiest airport. The unions rejected a 10.1% pay offer, saying inflation is below inflation. Heathrow rejects that, saying inflation is more likely at around 8%. Heathrow also says it has firm contingency plans in place. Talks continue, so a resolution is still possible.
Sejal Karia at Heathrow. Thank you. Now, a court heard today that a custody sergeant in a police station was shot dead when a suspect produced an antique gun from a secret underarm holster. The jury was shown footage of Sergeant Matt Ratner being shot in a holding cell. Louis de Zoyzer denies murder. Sam Holder was in court today. Sam, this is a terrible case. What did you learn today?
Yes, Mary, it is. Louis de Zoyzer somehow managed to bring a gun into the heart of a police station, into a custody suite in Croydon, South London, while under arrest, and fire it 4 times while handcuffed. The first of those shots was fatal. It struck Matt Ratner, a police sergeant of nearly 30 years who was just months away from retirement. The bullet pierced his heart. Another bullet also struck de Zoyzer in his own head, leaving him with brain damage. He now has to use a wheelchair and write down his answers in court on a whiteboard. Earlier that evening, he had been arrested after police found he was in possession of homemade bullets. But despite a 13-minute search by 2 officers, they didn't find the weapon that he'd hidden in a holster, an antique gun that he bought online and which was loaded with some other homemade bullets. Now, the defence say that de Zoyzer, who has autism, suffered from what they describe as an autistic meltdown, which forced him to fire the shots. They deny that he intended to kill the police sergeant.
Sam Holder in Northampton. Thank you. Well, there is plenty more still to come, the ITV Evening News, including... Could this be the future of medicine? ITV is behind the curtain for a special report on surgical robots.
Can the machine actually start telling you what part of the operation you're on, with a potential for a few years that some parts of the operation may become slightly semi-automated?
The wonder weight loss drug being trialled on the NHS, but how easy will it be to get hold of? And we'll be live from Washington to question the Prime Minister on all things from Prince Harry to AI. That's after this short break. Hello again, welcome back. The Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, is in Washington tonight for meetings with President Biden. Their talks are expected to cover a range of topics, including trade, artificial intelligence and, of course, the war in Ukraine. Now, on AI, the PM told ITV News he would be happy for a robot to teach his children. He spoke to our Deputy Political Editor, Anushka Astana.
Rishi Sunak arrived in Washington, D.C. last night for a whirlwind 2 days, including his first meeting with President Biden at the White House. First, a visit to Arlington National Cemetery and an iconic tomb to an unknown soldier killed during World War I.
Right.
At tomorrow's meeting with President Biden, another war will dominate. But was Russia responsible for the destruction of Ukraine's Kakhovka Dam?
Well, we don't know definitively the source of the attack. Our military and security services and military services are working through that, so I can't preempt the results of that. But look, Russia throughout this war has used as a deliberate active strategy to target civilian infrastructure. We've seen that. It's been an active strategy on their part. It's caused enormous suffering to the Ukrainian people, and it is wrong. It's barbaric and it's appalling.
So it looks like it was Russia?
No, I can't say that definitively yet. Our security and military services are working through it. But if true, if it does prove to be intentional, it will represent a new low.
Let's talk about artificial intelligence. The very people who create this stuff have said even they can't control it. They've got warnings of it flooding our internet with propaganda, automating everyone's jobs, maybe even yours, maybe even replacing us as humans. Does that terrify you?
I think that people have rightly heard these messages and they are concerned, and that's why I brought together the leading CEOs of the artificial intelligence companies a few weeks ago in Downing Street to talk about these issues.
Would you be comfortable with a robot looking after your grandmother or teaching your children?
Yeah, I think, technology throughout time has improved our lives and will continue to do so. Our job in government is to make sure that we can get those benefits, but make sure that at the same time we're protecting ourselves against the clear risks that the technology poses.
Do you agree with Prince Harry that your government has hit rock bottom?
I think there's been a long-standing convention that British Prime Ministers don't comment on matters to do with the royal family, as you know, and
I'm not asking you to comment on a member of the royal family. I'm asking you to comment on your government.
Well, I'm happy to say what my government is doing. I set out at the beginning of this year 5 priorities for the British people: to halve inflation, grow the economy, reduce debt, cut waiting lists and to stop the boats. I think we're making progress against all of those priorities.
From there, the Prime Minister was off to Capitol Hill to meet the House Speaker, senators and members of Congress ahead of the main event, tomorrow's visit to the White House.
At that meeting, Rishi Sunak really wants to make the case that the UK can be a world leader on AI. One challenge to him is that the US is already having talks about this with the EU. They've got a forum, they've drawn up a code of conduct. But look, before he even gets there, he's going to the baseball tonight to watch the Washington Nationals against the Arizona Diamondbacks. I'm told it is a thing to have a ceremonial first ball at that. Some people had thought Rishi Sunak might be the man to throw that ball. He insisted that was never the case. He says he's more of a cricket man.
Anushka Astana in Washington, thank you. And you can see Anushka's full interview with the Prime Minister on the Peston programme later. That's at 10:45 on ITV1 and 11:05 on STV. Now, health experts are hailing a new scheme to make weight loss jabs more widely available on the NHS, a potential game changer. An appetite suppressant drug, often known by the brand name Wegovy, is to be rolled out in a £40 million pilot scheme. Doctors hope it will help people who are obese to control their weight. Martha Fairley reports.
Carl McGee has type 2 diabetes and relies on injections of the drug semaglutide to keep his blood sugar under control. But the drug can also help weight loss, and demand from private patients has put a strain on supplies.
Well, if I can't get it, my blood sugars are going to go up again. I'm at risk of having a heart attack. I'm at risk of having a stroke.
Push the pen firmly against the skin until you hear the first click.
Earlier this year, the drug regulator NICE approved a brand of semaglutide called Wegovy to treat obesity on the NHS, but only for people with a body mass index of 35 or above and through specialist weight management services, usually based in hospitals. Today, the government announced a £40 million pilot scheme to look at how GPs might deliver obesity treatments like Wegovy to even more patients.
We think it will be in the region of around 10,000 additional patients, but that's from this initial pilot. And our ambition is to scale this out much more, but we need the evidence coming from the pilots to see that the support we give, the wraparound support through primary care alongside these new drugs is effective.
But for anyone trying to lose weight, there is a warning. This drug is not a miracle cure.
It won't work for everybody. It comes with side effects, and regardless of whether you're taking the injection or any other method, you do still need to be making changes to your eating habits and also your physical activity levels.
And pharmacists say supplies need to be guaranteed.
We can't deprive one group of patients to serve another group. It just, and the diabetics need the medication. So, yeah, great idea, but we need to get our supply chain organised before we do anything.
There's still no date for when Wegovy will be available in the UK, but when it is, demand's likely to be high. Martha Fairley, ITV News.
In other news, the Daily and Sunday Telegraph newspapers and the Spectator magazine are to be put up for sale. Lloyds Banking Group is reportedly looking to recover debts from companies controlled by the Barclay family, the billionaire owners of the Telegraph. And some sad news now about a much-loved television star who became, over many years, a legend of Coronation Street. The family of Julie Goodyear, who played the vivacious Rover's Return barmaid, Bette Lynch, of course, today revealed she has been diagnosed with dementia. Ellie Pitt reports.
Cheers, my lovely. Well done. Congratulations.
Oh, you can laugh, Lord.
She is one of Britain's best-loved landladies.
I am in charge. Get it? Got it.
Julie Goodyear and her character Bette Lynch are almost inseparable.
Maybe not. But it's a funny feeling all the same.
Today, Julie's husband described her heartbreaking diagnosis. The 81-year-old has dementia. In a statement, he explained why he's shared the news. Julie still loves visiting friends and eating out. Inevitably, she is recognised and fans love to meet her, and she them. But she can get confused, particularly if she's tired. I hope people will understand. Julie Goodyear joined the cast of Corrie full-time in 1970 and stayed on the cobbles for more than 25 years.
Oh, who's worrying? It's only my job, innit?
I suppose a pint and a packet of crisps out of the question then.
Straight-talking barmaid Bet Lynch felt like a role she was made for.
If you don't shut up... Actually, it wasn't until I saw the very first episode of Coronation Street that I knew exactly what I wanted.
And her famous leopard print style is still being recognised. This year's Soap Awards had a fashion icon gong in her name. But like her fellow soap barmaid Barbara Windsor, who was diagnosed with Alzheimer's before her death in 2020, Julie is now facing her own diagnosis.
I think it's incredibly brave of Julie and her family to be able to come out publicly and talk about her diagnosis. It hugely helps all of us who are in the fight against this disease.
Julie's family have asked for understanding, but they'll have so much more support and love from the fans she's brought joy to for all these years. Ellie Pitt, ITV News.
You are watching the ITV News. It's pretty much exactly 7 o'clock. Here's what's still ahead. Wildlife among wind farms. Is it time to lift the ban on building new onshore sites? Community and royalty come together to support a Swansea food bank.
We're in Prague as West Ham are now moments away from their biggest game in half a century.
Now we glasses. Find out about the posthumous honour planned for the late Paul O'Grady, a gift from his hometown.
He started off in Birkenhead, and I mean, he always came back to his roots.
He's worked hard for what he's got, and that's the main thing, isn't it? It'll please him up there.
And the first heat health alert of the year has been issued as temperatures head towards 30 degrees this coming weekend. Join me for the details on that and the national forecast live from the Eden Project in Cornwall later in the programme.
That's all to come, but first, could robots hold the key to cutting NHS waiting lists? ITV News has been given exclusive behind-the-scenes access to Guy's and St Thomas's in London to see the hospital's newest machine operate on a kidney for the very first time. Robots have been used by the Trust for nearly 20 years. They are proven to cut recovery times and also to free up hospital beds. Surgeons there say the technology has now become so advanced and affordable it could, and indeed should, be rolled out across the country to improve patient care and save the NHS money. Now, it can perform a wide range of operations, as you'll see in this report from our health correspondent, Martin Stew.
The middle one is the camera, and then the left and the right one would be a pair of scissors.
Guy's and St Thomas's in London carry out more robotic surgeries than any other hospital trust in England.
But it's not as big as it looks on that scan. You know what I mean?
ITV News was given exclusive access to see their latest robot operate on a kidney for the first time. While surgeon Ben set to work, I went to see the machine away from the sterile wrappings of the operating theatre.
This is our surgical robot, Hugo, and today's patient is a red pepper. And this is the console that we're going to use to control Hugo.
Can you show me how it works?
Of course. I'll need to put on my glasses so that I can see everything in 3D. It's very much like using your wrists, but inside the body, so you can perform very fine-grained actions.
So if this was a human's organ rather than a pepper, what benefits are they getting?
They're getting the benefits of very precise instrument control so that I can be very deliberate with my actions and hopefully preserve as much of the healthy tissue as possible.
But it is you in control, not the robot?
Completely, fully. It's the surgeon that's in control of all of the actions.
So this isn't AI surgery?
Not yet.
At £1.5 million, Hugo is cheaper than the systems which are already in use. So can I take it for a spin, Dan?
100%. Just first try grasping a seed, one close by.
The 3D is so good, isn't it, in terms of being able to get the depth perception. I mean, it's mirroring exactly what my wrist does.
That's right. but on a much finer scale.
Yeah.
And in a much smaller environment.
Back in theatre, not only is Hugo sharing the video footage with colleagues to help with teaching, but artificial intelligence is learning and labelling what's happening.
The first step of actually starting to have a robot that will help you is that the robot needs to know where it is and what it's doing. And this is the first step of it actually showing you where it is in the operation.
Kidney removed, Hugo and Ben's work is done.
Surgery went really well. Extremely good robot, very, very good vision, very dexterous. I think it's got a big impact potentially for the wider NHS. Not many people are using robotics, and because this system is easy to pick up and cheaper than the standard system that is existing already, there is much greater potential to roll that out.
Worldwide, robots are estimated to be used in about 4% of all operations. In England, the number of robotic procedures carried out by the NHS has increased by about a third in the last 4 years to nearly 36,000. But that's dwarfed by the number of people awaiting treatment, currently a record high 7.3 million.
As the waiting lists increase, unless we have more access to this kind of instrumentation, we can't do our job. If we have the same capacity as we did before the pandemic, we are just going to fail.
Rob, do you want to have a look at your scar?
Not at all, a pleasure.
Rob was one of the first patients to have his prostate removed by Hugo.
2 scars there and there, and back in the day that would have been a continuous scar.
He left hospital just a day after his operation.
Well, it's a no-brainer. If you need surgery and it is possible to have robotic surgery, have robotic surgery. Because it is far less traumatic, it's far more effective, it's safer.
The kidney patient we filmed is doing well. Surgeons say the speed of recovery will save bed space, time, and importantly, money. It's up to NHS management to decide whether that saving justifies funding the rise of the robots. Martin Stew, ITV News.
Well, now let's get an update on what's making the news tonight. Prince Harry has finished giving evidence in his phone hacking case against tabloid newspapers. He told the High Court he would feel some injustice if his claims against the Mirror Group were not believed. Ukrainian officials say hundreds of thousands of people have had no access to clean drinking water after the damage to a dam on the Dnipro River. And here's security staff at Heathrow Airport will take part in a fresh wave of strikes this summer, with walkouts planned almost every weekend during the holidays. The government's coming under growing pressure to lift what is effectively a ban on building new wind farms in England. It is 6 months since Rishi Sunak pledged to re-examine the ban, but so far no decision has been announced. Opponents, though, say wind farms can be a danger to wildlife, as Chloe Keedy reports.
This delicate dance could have deadly consequences. But on this wind farm in Cheshire, rare marsh harriers live and breed alongside these huge turbines and hundreds of other species of bird.
So we get a lot of wetland birds, so ducks, waders, gulls, geese, big populations of warblers in the reed beds, and a whole load of sort of small birds.
Frodsham is one of England's biggest onshore wind farms. The birds were here before the turbines were built, and Jenny's job is making sure they'll be here long after as well.
This was a major corridor for birds flying from the estuary over there to the inland areas that they're using, the wetlands, the fields beyond. And so this was the area that we didn't put turbines into, so the birds could still leave from the estuary and fly inland.
So it's essentially a flight path?
It is, yeah, exactly. It's a safe one.
Jenny has spent years monitoring this site and tracking the behaviour of the birds both before and after the turbines went up.
What this is showing is it's the pattern of movements around the wind farm and how and in this example it's Shelduck, have responded to the presence of the wind turbines by flying around them.
So they've adapted?
So they've adapted to the presence of the turbines.
It's impossible for Jenny and her team to measure how many birds are killed by these turbines. But what they do know is that overall populations aren't in decline. In fact, this area is now home to more species than it was before the wind farm was built.
Across the UK, onshore wind farms are estimated to kill up to 100,000 birds a year. Far fewer than the millions killed by cats, and according to Britain's biggest bird charity, just a fraction of the number endangered by the effects of climate change.
The risks of climate change far outweigh the damage, as long as those developments are delivered with nature's recovery at its heart. So what we're seeing at the moment from government doesn't go nearly far enough. It's really just fiddling around the edges while our planet is burning, and we need to see a real revolution in onshore wind to properly tackle the nature and climate crisis.
Because while the future of the natural world hangs in the balance, it's rising temperatures and not the turning of these turbines that poses the greatest threat. Chloe Keedy, ITV News, Cheshire.
A food bank in Swansea, supported by the Prince and Princess of Wales, has been robbed for the third time. Baby items are among the goods cleared out by the thieves, and as Rhys Williams reports, the local community is now leading a campaign to restock it.
It simply hasn't stopped. Since news of the robbery broke on Monday morning, St Thomas's Church in Swansea has been inundated with donations, food, toys and cash. This food bank in one of Swansea's most deprived areas was visited last year by the Prince and Princess of Wales. Here they were told how the church supports the community with its food bank and baby bank, but over the weekend all of the stock was stolen.
We often feel like we can't do enough, and I think that was a reminder that there are people who are in a very dark place at the moment.
But the response to this appalling incident has been extraordinary.
We've had everything from somebody coming in giving us £5 and saying, you know, we're really supportive, to we've had the Prince and Princess of Wales office call us on behalf of them to offer support. And it's been hard to feel discouraged or sad because we've been so surrounded by love, basically.
Donations have been pouring in from local organisations since Monday morning.
We were horrified when we heard that they'd had a big break-in here. So we brought some baby basics today, toilet rolls, of course, essential, and a cash donation.
For those who depend on this church, there was shock, but also gratitude that this community hub was back on its feet so quickly.
It's really wrong, like, you know, it's just unbelievable, like somebody could break into a church.
We walked up there and I was shocked that it was open, so that's how good they are, like, you know, they don't let you down, do they?
There's an open invitation from the church to the thief to come in and talk. They say they don't want to punish someone who is clearly desperate. Rather, they want to help in any way they can. Rhys Williams, ITV News, Swansea.
Some football news now. The England footballer Jude Bellingham is set to join Spanish giants Real Madrid in a deal worth £89 million. The 19-year-old, who currently plays for German side Borussia Dortmund, is seen as one of the world's most exciting young prospects. Well, here, West Ham fans have waited half a century for a European trophy, but it does seem glory does indeed beckon tonight in the Europa Conference League. With the stadium in Prague so small, though, tickets for the final against the Italian side Fiorentina have been at a premium, and there have been some disturbances, with 16 arrests already made. Rags Martel reports.
They sing about blowing bubbles. But rarely have West Ham flown so high. Prague, the setting for their Europa Conference League final. But most of these fans aren't going to the game.
You got tickets? No. I ain't got tickets, it's about being here. It's about being here with the West Ham family. End of.
How disappointing is it not having a ticket?
Oh, silly disappointment, yeah. Yeah, really disappointed. Don't, because I could get emotional about it.
The Fortuna Arena is where the match will be played, a relatively small stadium for a European final. And West Ham have only been given around 5,000 seats, but many, many more have made the trip out here without tickets. And the problem of getting in is dividing families.
You haven't got a ticket now?
No.
She ain't. I have, she ain't.
They've got tickets, but I ain't.
Your dad?
Yes.
Oh, all right.
I've been waiting for this moment a lot longer than her.
In the centre of the Czech capital, 250 extra police have been deployed for the final. The Met's football and policing unit is also here. As of the early afternoon, this was the only reported incident. Italian ultras allegedly attacking a bar where West Ham fans were drinking. Czech police later posted this photo saying they'd made 16 arrests. Keeping the harmony for the supporters, the singer Chesney Hawkes headlining at West Ham's fan park.
We didn't know that we had tickets, but we've just found out that we're going to be going to the game.
The mood tonight is of happy hammers. Only Fiorentina can burst their bubble now. Rags Martel, ITV News, Prague.
Well, still to come for Emmerdale, a national treasure and a local legend, Paul O'Grady's posthumous honour from his birthplace.
And with temperatures expected to head towards 30 degrees in the coming days, how will we all cope with the heat? Join me for the national forecast from the Eden Project in a couple of minutes.
Beautiful, isn't it? Join me and Alex after this short break. See you then. Hello again, welcome back. Now, the first heat health alert of the year was issued by the Met Office today, with temperatures this weekend expected to reach around 29 degrees Celsius. That's 84 Fahrenheit, so really hot. Alex is at the Eden Project in Cornwall for our weather tonight. And Alex, it's looking beautiful where you are.
It is, Mary, but as you say, we have our first heat health alert of the year, and that is issued because we're expecting there to be some impacts on the health and social sector as we head through the coming days, with this warm plume of air arriving, which we'll take a closer look at in just a second. But this heat health alert comes into effect at 9 o'clock on Friday morning all the way through to Monday, with those temperatures expected to be close to 30 degrees Celsius, particularly in the south. So this affects many southern counties of England in particular. So people that are over the age of 65, perhaps have respiratory problems, and also young babies could be affected by the heat. So go careful as we head through the coming days. Don't go out in the midday heat, and also try and keep yourselves hydrated. Let's take a look at where this is all coming from. And we've been tracking Storm Oscar, which started off in the Canaries earlier this week. That is heading towards us, so it's going to feed in that warm plume of air. Added in with that, the risk of some thundery downpours, so there could well be some more warnings to come in the coming days. And you can see temperatures are going to be warmer than the likes of Ibiza as we head through into the weekend. 29 possible, maybe 30 just north of London, I wouldn't be surprised. And also UV levels very high across much of the board, actually. So even if you're going to be out and about for short periods of time, make sure you do protect yourself. I hope everyone that's here inside the Eden Project this evening is protecting themselves. The sun still feels quite strong. They're inside to watch Lionel Richie, who's taking to the stage at 9 o'clock this evening. Right, let's take a look at the forecast then for the next few days.
Everywhere will be lovely and warm today. You might even be tempted to go for a dip. Heinz Seriously Good Mayonnaise sponsors ITV National Weather.
Well, with that warm plume of air heading our way for this weekend, let's start with the forecast for it. And it is actually going to be a little unstable. That air mass could be quite up and down. So thunderstorms could be on the cards, particularly in the south, and also some warm, muggy nights, again, which could be quite uncomfortable for sleeping. As for our pressure pattern setup, well, for the time being, we've still got the high pressure, which is on the move. It's moving out towards the east, and that will help eastern parts of the UK actually get more of the sunshine over the coming days, and also temperatures creeping up here as well. But you notice down towards the southwest, we start to see the first signs of any sign of rain edging its way in, which will be with us for this coming weekend. As for this evening, well, it stays dry really across the board, and like we've had over the last several nights, I've been saying this every day, the cloud which is out in the North Sea comes back in across much of the UK. But the good news is that as we head into tomorrow, rather quickly, it will start to get nibbled back towards the North Sea as we push on into the afternoon. Temperatures comfortably sitting at around 24, 25 degrees, maybe even 26 actually, and also highs of maybe 21 out towards western parts of Scotland. So respectable temperatures all round. As I say, high levels of UV, and as we look at the weekend, Friday through to Sunday, temperatures climbing through the 20s. As I say, the high 20s, 30, certainly possible somewhere in the southeast, maybe on Saturday or Sunday.
Heinz Seriously Good Mayonnaise sponsors ITV National Weather.
Well, Mary, by this time, usually it's packed in front of the stage, but because the weather is so nice, everyone is dotted around at the Eden Project. Hopefully, by the time Lionel comes on, there'll be a huge crowd for him to perform in front of.
Enjoy it, Alex. Thank you. And finally, the sad death of the entertainer Paul O'Grady back in March left many thousands of people feeling as though they had lost a friend. Well, tonight, the local council has agreed he should posthumously be granted the freedom of his birthplace, the Wirral, as a mark of both respect and affection. Amy Welch reports.
Well, good evening and welcome to my little show. Now, you'll have to excuse the way I'm dressed because I've just come straight from work. But
a little show which filled people's living rooms with laughter. Lily Savage was loud and lovable.
Aren't you pretty?
Paul O'Grady was caring and compassionate. And now this blonde bombshell is set to receive the biggest honour of his career, the freedom of the borough where he was born.
He was asked Liverpool, he said no, Birkenhead, so put us on the map.
He was very down to earth, wasn't he? There was no ifs or buts, there was no airs and graces with him.
But he started off in Birkenhead, and I mean, he always came back to his roots.
A comedian, but also a campaigner, Paul O'Grady was a social warrior who broke down barriers for the LGBT community and never forgot his northern roots.
Paul O'Grady grew up here on Holly Grove in Birkenhead. His first job was a paper round, and he often spoke fondly of a childhood spent watching the boats sailing up and down the River Mersey.
Paul was a pupil at St Joseph's Catholic Primary School, and youngsters there say they'll remember him as a dog lover and a legend.
To know that he came to our school is very special.
He was very good with dogs.
He's a legend and everyone loves him. He's done lots and lots of things for dogs and made their day.
A tribute fund at Battersea Dogs Home has reached £300,000 and there are calls for a statue in his hometown. But freedoms of the borough are rare, and at tonight's council meeting it was agreed he's worthy of such an accolade. Dr Nunzia Bertale received the same award for services to the Italian community.
Feeling that the council want to recognise what I've done really meant a lot to me. And unfortunately for Paul, it's going to happen afterwards.
The wit and the wig are hard to forget, and Wirral Council are expected to confirm how they'll remember the man who became a national treasure next month. Amy Welch, ITV News, Birkenhead.
Oh, Paul O'Grady. And that's all for now. Julie's here at 10.